It's common for people anchoring the news to try to minimize their accents, but you can hear it if you listen carefully. I'm from North Carolina, and sometimes it'll show in how I speak and the words I say, like this: Biscuitville, Cookout. See? North Carolina, right? But seriously, the US has dozens of distinct regional accents, reflecting not just place, but race and ancestry too. But these days, we're not as regionally confined as we used to be. Our media comes from all over the world. People can travel easily and move further from home more often. So as that happens, are all of our accents going away? The answer might not be as easy as you think. Often it can look like that's the case from the small sample sizes we hear. Take the New York accent. Or hang on, let me try it here. New York accent. Sorry to our New York fans watching tonight. Or used to be fans, depending on how you take that accent. It's probably the most visible regional accent in American culture, frequently being immortalized in TV and film.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
And in recent years, variations of it have become a frequent voice in American politics.
And they're thinking, it's not a presidential election, what's the big deal? Why should I go out and vote? Why should I knock on doors or work on a campaign? Who cares?
Now they have 25 billion, I've seen 15 billion, I've seen a lot of money. I don't know how you're gonna spend that much, but that's what they're saying.
But what you might think of as a traditional New York accent has seemingly been on the decline in younger generations. Queens College linguistics professor Michael Newman is part of a team trying to build a 2 million word collection of New York City English. He's a native New Yorker and sounds like one too. He helped us answer the question, what makes a New York accent?
The one everybody notices is what we call, in technically, raised thought. That is the vowel in the word thought that appears in a lot of other words. Another one which is stereotypical is the dropping of the R after a vowel. So caw or baw and huh, like I saw her yesterday. And that one is in decline. Also, the thought vowel is also in decline in the sense that younger people don't tend to do it as much.
But New York ain't a monolith. The variations across the city show us how accents from anywhere in the world can change even from one neighborhood to the next. Filmmaker Heather Quinlan documented the New York accent in her documentary, If These Knishes Could Talk, and sees several different accents, even just among white New Yorkers.
Any Pacino De Niro movie is an Italian New York accent. Jimmy Cagney, even Archie Bunker, even though he wasn't Irish, so it's an Irish New York accent. That's what I have. A Jewish New York accent would be Woody Allen, Larry David.
And they all can sound different from Black, Latino, or Asian New Yorkers. So what about that question of disappearing accents? Michael told us some of the classic New York sounds are declining among white, Asian, and Latino New Yorkers. But for Black New Yorkers, who used to not use some of those sounds, the opposite has happened.
We find that a lot of African Americans have the what used to be the stereotypical white feature and of the raised thought that has not declined to the same extent that it's declining in some of the other communities. So they've acquired this feature over time, and now it's being like preserved as becomes an African American associated feature.
Another reason why it's harder to quantify whether accents are dying is because it's just hard to tell who has an accent. Linguists will tell you everyone has one, but some people's vowel sounds make them sound more neutral. You'll hear that more in people from the West and parts of the Midwest than in folks from down South or along the East Coast. And even people who come from places with strong accents might not see themselves as having one. Chicago is definitely associated with an accent. Just ask a Chicagoan of a certain age about their favorite football team.
The Bears. The Bears.
But until things like that SNL skit made people in Chicago recognize they had an accent, people there wouldn't think they had one.
A kid from Chicago, he was about 19 years old, I must have collected these data around 1990. And I gave him a blank map of the United States, as I've done to hundreds of people, and say, draw circles around all the places where people speak differently. He drew a big circle around Chicago and said, normal English for the average person.
Dennis Preston at the University of Kentucky has been studying this kind of stuff for a long time. He joked with us that very few people talk like him anymore. He's of the thought that accents change naturally over time as people change and move from one place to another. And he doesn't think things like the internet or TikTok are changing accents faster than they normally have.
I take a kind of dim view of the fact that anything is rapidly causing dialects to change or to level, that is, to become more similar to one another very rapidly. That was supposed to happen when radio suddenly became available. Everybody's going to sound the same because now they'll listen to each other. Then it happened with television, and now it's supposed to be happening because of the internet. What I see mostly happening is lexical change, and especially change in slang.
Adding to the difficulty, people are constantly changing their voice depending on who they're talking to. You might have heard this described as code switching, something I'm guilty of doing. Many of the classic features of accents may not be used in public as much when people are interacting more with speakers from other places. So if an accent's features are staying alive, you might not necessarily get to hear them. Pomona College linguistics professor Nicole Holliday studies this for a living, focusing on how people change their pitches depending on social identity. She told us more using the example of being rhotic versus non-rhotic. In other words, whether you can call it a car or a car.
So people imagine that this is a loss of a regional variety, but there's other stuff coming in probably that still make those regions distinct. So I'm not from Boston or New York. So when people talk to me, they're going to accommodate to me. Maybe they don't pronounce their R's 100% of the time when they talk to their parents, but they do when they're talking to me, or they do when they're making a YouTube video for a general public.
Even experts in this have to deal with switching things up. Being from Ohio, Nicole told us she changes parts of her speech now that she lives in California.
I will avoid sometimes using Midwestern features in California. Like, I don't say, if I go to a restaurant, I don't say, what kind of pop do you have? Because I don't want to have a 30-minute conversation about why I'm from Ohio. I just want to order a Coca-Cola.
So we've covered how our accents differ, but we want to talk about one big driving force that shapes our accents. That's pop culture. One of our producers, Roey Haydar, who has been digging in on this topic for us, has a bit of an accent himself. He spoke with people from across America and has more for us on how pop culture and identity shape how we speak.
Smart.
Water.
Theater. Magnet, or magnet if I were assimilating to the East Coast.
Let's face it, no matter where you're from, you have an accent. Sometimes we think we don't.
I think that was the first time I was like, oh, I like talk different than other people.
But we all do. Take me, for example. I'm from New Jersey. You got a problem with that? Seriously, I never thought I had an accent until I left New Jersey. All of us having accents is a natural consequence of all of us consuming different forms of media.
You gotta pick your battles. You want your no-show jobs, Vito's gotta go.
I'd be very surprised if our suspect was from Brainerd.
Yeah.
And just being from other places. Those differences can crack us up sometimes.
Jesus turned water into wine, not almonds into milk.
One's gonna go fast, so hold on to your girdle.
Pop culture in particular, comedy or otherwise, is a big part of how we recognize our regional accents. And many productions work hard on getting those right.
So you study the person as much as you can, the where, the who, the why. That creates a posture in your mouth in which you speak. Whether you're back in the mouth, whether you're in the middle of the mouth, whether you're nasal, whether you're whatever. Your posture supports the pronunciation. And as soon as you change your posture, the pronunciation is different. And then once you get to, after that, there's prosody, which is the musicality.
Erin Nicole Washington is a dialect coach, the kind of person a TV show, a movie, anywhere with actors really, will rely on to figure out how to approximate a certain kind of speech. For an upcoming piece set in 1960s Baltimore, she says she's relied on listening to older speakers.
If I'm working on a period piece that's in the 60s, it's not the same rhythm. Even though they have the same accent sound shifts, pronunciation-wise, they don't speak in the same rhythm as they did in the 60s.
We're also collectively examining our accents on TikTok, where they've helped a lot of folks go viral.
I do a grandma character that's Southern, and that sounds like my family from the South, and so I think that comes to me naturally.
I'll give you a discount on it. Let's say $300. Well, I know that seems high, but the mode on it is actually from the 60s.
For Kendall Landreth, who has earned over 1.6 million followers on TikTok for her comedy, a lot of humor comes not just from the accent, but from the specifics.
It's not just, oh, she's a Southern accent. It's, oh, she shops at this supermarket and she goes to church and this is where they eat after church. And if you say Piggly Wiggly, there's no way to like say that not Southern. If I was saying, oh, I'm going to shop at Trader Joe's, that just doesn't feel right.
But there's plenty of fun in vowel sounds, and if you learn them studying drama or music, that can help you spot them too. That's how Amber Estenson figured out her Minnesota accent could take her far.
In this region, we tend to spread our vowels this way, and they get really, really rounded. So like Minnesota, or Fargo, North Dakota, there's that little lilt in there.
By her own admission, even though she grew up hearing it, her accent isn't that thick. But when she's recording, those vowels get really rounded.
Because of course it's not really supper in Minnesota if you don't have potatoes.
Amber thinks part of the appeal is what's associated with the accent.
Everybody else on my social media channels say, you remind me of my grandma, or you remind me of Auntie Barb. So it's really wholesome. It's really like maybe a little bit country.
Research shows that your accent can lead to people assuming your level of intelligence or your personality type. But even if we laugh, we know those stereotypes aren't always accurate. For example, researchers found Southern accents were associated with a lack of education. But ask someone from there, like Tennessee native turned Philadelphian Elizabeth Fisher, and that's less true.
Some of my dearest friends that I met from outside of my school had thick Southern accents, and they were multi-generation Tennessee, and they are really smart. They went to Ivy League schools. It's not an actual indicator of intelligence.
Then again, humans are inherently social and looking for community. We make fun of politicians or public figures for putting on an accent.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far from where I started from.
It's a great night to be a tiger. I'm here with my family.
By the way, she grew up in the Chicago suburbs and he grew up just outside Boston. But research says we all put on voices too. Sure, they got caught on camera doing it, but trying to sound like the crowd you're in is human instinct.
So of course we behave in pro-social ways because that's part of our survival instinct. When we accommodate to other people, we call this communication accommodation or speech accommodation. It facilitates our conversations with them. And it also is pro-social in saying like, hey, I'm aligning with you. I'm like you.
Often we just want to find community, either by leaning into the place we moved to.
Some things that I've noticed since I've been living in the Philadelphia area that I've picked up on, and the long O sound. So hoagies is you go to Wawa and you get a hoagie. You ride on a boat.
Or by embracing our roots, like Dorchester, Massachusetts native Sean Sweeney.
Definitely among my family, we all have one, and I hear it in my parents strongly. And as I move in and out of that space, I'm like, oh, I'm switching into that as we communicate. And
what you see as an accent isn't just vowel sounds either. A lot of it comes down to word choice.
And when I was like 17, 18, first traveling to New York, New Jersey, and I asked for a pop in a restaurant, and the waitress didn't know what I was referring to. And soda.
There are definite splits in what words we use. Good luck convincing someone from the Midwest to say caramel instead of caramel, or someone from the South to say coal before they say slaw. So whether you have
hot
water,
or as we New Jerseyans might call it, coffee, cheers to having an accent that's all your own.